All right. FeaR. Tell me about yourself. When did you first start getting into Ratchet and Clank speedruns?
It was a while ago. Mid 2017-ish. I'd already experimented with a bit of Quake speedrunning and never finished learning it. And I experimented with. I did a lot of b-hopping in Counter-Strike, for anyone who knows what that is. And I don't know. I liked the thrill of going quick, but and like trying to beat a time, but neither of those games really stood out to me. And then I remember it was like early mid 2017. I saw Zems run a GDQ of Ratchet 3.
Yeah.
Like a 34-16 or something off memory. And I saw that, I was like, oh, this is really sick. But I didn't want to try. At the time, there was quite a stigma between the two, where it was like, oh, Rack 2's the entry game, it's easier, and then Ratchet 3 is like, it's the real man's game, to put it that way. It's a bit of a bad analogy, but that's kind of how the view was on it.
Yeah.
And at the time, to be fair, it was kind of true. Rec 2 was a good chunk easier back then. But so because of that, I started messing around with Ratchet 2 tech probably mid 2017, and I started doing runs just a little bit later. I don't 100% remember when, but yeah, it was around that time. Yeah.
Okay. Somewhere in the 2017 range.
Yeah, mid to late 2017 is when it really started.
Okay. And I believe that's more or less when I think Zem and Scotto were kind of going back and forth a lot. Well,
I think more early to late 2018 off memory, but I might be remembering that wrong because I'd played for a while before they had their beef. Because I remember I was almost in contention for world record by the time they started beefing. Almost being the keyword there. I'd not really beat. Well, yeah, I'm sure they've both given you their scoop on that, but
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, when they had their back and forth, they yeah, I'd already been playing for a year-ish, I think.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you were in contention. Like, what was that like being, or how? I try to just look it up. I don't know why I'm. Yeah, well, I don't know. Do you have an independent? God, I can't speak today. It's late. Apparently, it's been a long day. You said you were almost in contention for world record. This is in 2018.
Let me just check some dates. I have some runs up, but I got the wrong runs up. Let me just throw myself back a while. I remember it was like roughly when I got what's now a 2548 on the boards. That back then we didn't have a long load removal, so that was a 26 flat for ages. That was right around when I started to be considered, and I personally started to consider myself world record level. It was yeah, like at that point there was quite a few people hovering around. At this time we had a few more runners. Outrageous Josh from the Jack community, he was playing at the time, and he had, it was funny, there was like this 3-day period where me, him, and I think 2 other runners all PB'd and were like less than 3 seconds apart.
Okay.
For like 48 hours or something, and that was around 26:52. And then I remember it was like 2 days after that, I was like, yeah, stuff this. And so I somehow managed to clutch out a PB, and I got the 26 flat. And then from there, people were like, oh, okay, like it's actually kind of close. At this time, of course, the record was 25:35. And I was, at this point, I'd been playing and I'd been pushing. I think I went. It didn't take me that long to go from 29 to 26. It was like under a 6-month period. Where I remember my times went down. It was like more than double the amount that the world record went down. But yeah, that was when I really started thinking it, and I think that was right around. This is where I got to give credit to Zem and Scotto, because they're both such supportive members of the community, and I doubt either of them would be arrogant enough to say it. But, well, not really arrogant, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
they especially, I remember they were really pushing. They were like, "Come on, you could get this record if you kept at it." But I just remember by this point, I got some things happened in life, and I was like, couldn't really keep up with it for a little bit. And I was also
Right.
just kind of burnt out at this point. I'd been playing for like a year straight, kind of thing, with very few breaks, and so it was like I needed a break, and so I ended up actually stepping away right about when I became contender, which is I think quite different to the usual story. And then I didn't come back for quite a while. Looking at my runs, yeah, so that run was mid 2018, and then I didn't come back and beat that. Yeah, that was the 6th. That was
Almost a full year
13th and
later.
6th. Yeah, and then I didn't come back until 7 months later, right in early
Oh.
2019.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at something else. Okay.
At this point, it's weird as well because I had played since.
Yeah.
I tried to come back a few times, but then, a mixture of personal things coming up and just, just being a little burnt out still. I just didn't really push that hard. So my sum of best segments was almost a minute lower than it was the last time I played, and I hadn't PB'd. But then I came back, and I think off memory, this was a stretch where I got a lot of PBs. Yeah, this is when I really started pushing. So I think if you really wanted to know when I started really considering myself a contender, it was around with that 25-20, which was 28th of the 1st, 2019. And from there, I started pushing all the categories. So record was 24-22. And then in very short time frame, I brought it down to 25-14. And then I went and played NG Plus, which is obviously the shorter category. Because there was a bit of beef in there, and it was just fun to play at the time. And at the time, it was pretty much just the no IMG late game until very recently, until like the last 6 months, where I've really pushed NG Plus. NG Plus was always seen as this like offshoot of no IMG. It's like, yeah, it's just the end game of no IMG, and so you'd always have the no IMG runners also being the top NG Plus runner. It was usually the same holder. And it still is, but it usually always was the same holder, because it was just the late game. And literally, you'd just get people that would just grind it to practice. And I know I just went over to NG Plus for a bit because I was having issues with my late game. And so I just went, hey, I'll go play NG Plus, get a good late game, and come back. And so that's what I did. And then yet again, I did that and then came back to no IMG. And that's when I got 25-10. Which at this point, I think world record was like a 24-52, I want to say, off memory. So again, I was
Something like
even
that, yeah.
closer than I'd ever been. But again, I just needed to step away. I don't actually remember why I stepped away. I want to say personal stuff again. I remember a lot of the times I had to step away, just stuff happened in life, which is really annoying. But it's how it happens. And so I ended up just stepping away again, even though I was keen and I was on the cusp. And I knew that, but I just couldn't, bring myself to stay at it, essentially.
Yeah.
So I took another big break after I got that. So that was, 18th of the 2nd, 2019. And then I remember I came back, and it was like my 3rd day, barely any practice, and I PB'd again. Let me pull up this one. When was this? If my speedrun.com would like to load, that'd be really dope. Oh, actually, it wasn't as long as I remember. Interesting. According to Speedrunning.com, they're only a day apart, so maybe.
Maybe some date fuckery going around there.
Yeah. Let me pull up what did end up being the record. Oh, okay, no. Yeah, okay, so I'm remembering it wrong. Yeah. So the 24-52, I did get the 24, and then I dipped.
Yes.
So I got the 24, didn't quite get world record. I was pretty freaking close to it, though. I was like 7 seconds off or something.
Yes.
Unless this is right when Scotty got 24-22. I don't remember. You'd have to date check. But then that's when I stepped away for 4 months and came back. And then it was like my 3rd day back, and I got 24-20. So instantly a 30-second crushing. And then at this point, I was like, okay, this could go well. Because at this point, I was plus 20 seconds out of Felton. I've got in my description here. And I was just keen. And so then like a few days later, 24:10. And this is where the story gets kind of funny because so Scotto had gotten in. I don't remember what speedrunning marathon it was, but there was a marathon that he was running in, and he was running no IMG. And so he was just derusting. And like just after I got 24:20, it was like I think it was like the next day, another runner called Mantadia, he found on Whoopash a way to do what we call zero drop. I don't know if you've been told much about that.
I asked Scotto specifically. I was like, "What the hell does zero drop mean?" So
yeah, so it just so the way to to make it so there's zero shops. Oh god, English, zero ships left after the nuke, and we found that. Well, Mantadia specifically originally found that, and then we all played around with it. So it had only been a strat for about 12 hours, and then Scotto used it as just a practice run for the marathon. And he clutched out the first 23. He snagged that from me, which was quite funny. I remember being quite upset, but also really excited for him at the time. I was like, damn, he stole my 23. Because at this point, I had like a 24:10. But that was really insane of him. He got 23:52, I want to say. And then did the marathon and then hasn't played no IMG since. But at that point, I was mad. I remember I tried to beat it for a bit, and then I got parred down with schoolwork, and it was just busy, so I couldn't play for a bit.
Yeah.
But then I came back, and where is it? 23:45. Yeah, so not too much later.
A couple months.
Yeah, so 24. Where's the 24:10? Yeah, so damn, I don't know why my internet's being so slow. It's struggling to open anything. So yeah, the 24:10 was in 7th month of the year, and then Scotto got the 23 a few days later, and then I again had to take a step away for personal reasons, and then finally came back. And I was like, this is when I told myself, I'm like, even though I managed to get the 24:20, which was world record, and then 24:10, like, and that was really good, and I ended up holding it for about, I think, half a month to a month or something. And I was happy with that. That was pretty much always my goal with no IMG. After I started to become a thing, I was like, I would love to do that and just hold it for a little bit. But after he beat it, I was kind of just like, I mean, the record still kind of sucks, and I'm not happy with it.
Right.
And so I came back, and that's when I got 23:45. Well, it actually took me a few tries. I had to get 23 first. So I got 23:58, 23:57, and then 23:45 finally. And like, so the main thing in there, like a lot of this, there are a few niche things. Like with, I think Scotto went through strats more with you, I've been told, or at least was planning to. There was this jamming array reroute.
Yep.
Saved a bunch of time there, and basically that, as well as like a bunch of other things, which I kind of we found like there wasn't many new strats, so to speak. But basically I went through and I just went, where can we do better movement? And this is people started making fun of me for always just doing like such niche timings, right? Like I'd go through and I'd compare in little 5-second snippets. I would time 4 different ways to do it. And I'd be like, all right, this one is half a second quicker, or this is 0.2 quicker, or whatever. And I just went through a good chunk of the game, and I just tried to figure out realistically what, without being too ridiculous, what the fastest route was.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when I started to compile. And that's always now what I base my route off. I always try and time it to that little tiny detail. And I think that was the main thing which separated me, because for ages, there was always a thing where Scotto, for ages, I had better golds than Scotto. Like my best splits on each split.
Right.
I think even back when he had the 24 52, I think I still had like half the. Have you been showing the com gold sheet?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let me link this to you. Is there a chat I should put this in?
Actually, you know what? Do it real quick. I'm going to give you the role. Why can't I? God damn it! Hang on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to give you the role that'll show you our projects folder. So,
Yeah, it's got a few things I could give you, which probably would help you.
Yeah. So towards the bottom, you'll see Rack 2 is up there by general links and stuff.
Oh, yep.
And then Rack 2.
Cool. All right.
Drop that in there.
So there's this link, and basically what this is, and it's been running for a while. But basically what it is, for each of the Ratchet games, we just compile golds, the best golds anyone's done.
Yeah.
In most of the categories and just like each segment. And so even on this sheet, it's kind of like a mini flex. Most of it is like seeing a theoretical how far we could push it.
Yeah.
But there's also that little tiny degree of like, I'm gonna beat Scotto, you know, or whatever on a bunch of the golds. And so even when he had like 2452, I still had like half of these com golds. But his thing was always he was just so damn consistent.
Yeah.
Like I think even Zen, when he competed against Scotto, found it hard to just be as consistent as Scotto. That was like the big thing. So it was always, there was like this competition at the time when it was me and Scotto. I was faster in most places, but I couldn't finish the run on pace. And then Scotto was slower, but he could actually get that run out. And that was kind of the dynamic there. So the main difference, I went through and I was like, okay, I might as well capitalize on my strength, because I knew this. I always knew this, that his thing was consistency. So I just went, all right, I'll capitalize on what I'm better at, which is just pure speed in each area. And then because I did that, it kind of made this more refined route in my head.
Right.
And so because I did that, I was then able to go through and I could just practice really specific stuff so that I could try and, like, you know, get Scotto back at his own game, you know, being consistent.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I got myself to 2345. Another thing is I sat down and I tried to understand zero drop on Whoopash and like some of those new niche things that started to get developed. So a lot of it just comes down to like small snippets that, again, you couldn't really call strats, but they were just optimized movement.
Yeah.
So then from there, we're almost at the current day. From there, I again took a step away. That was 2019. That was over a year. Goddamn.
Yeah.
This is kind of nostalgic for me.
Yeah. Time flies, don't
it? It really does. Yeah, so from there, again, I took a step away. This time, not for any major reason other than just, again, I'd been grinding and I was like, I finally achieved it. And so I took a step away because at this point, the record, I kind of knew 23, 3x, maybe a little lower, was kind of like an absolute top tier run. And I did want to go for that. But I just kept on, I quit at that point to give myself time and do other things, like other categories. But then I didn't end up coming back because I got interested in other things and just getting plowed down with, you know, a busy life again.
Yeah.
And then, so when I finally came back, it's interesting because that's pretty much the modern day where we are when I came back.
Yeah.
I decided I wanted to focus on the two categories I cared about. So I wanted to do no IMG, obviously, because it's like the category I've always played. It's like my baby, you know?
Yeah.
But I also, at this point, I wanted to do what all the other NG Plus record holders had done, which was hold NG Plus, no IMG, and NG Plus. But I'd never held NG Plus. And it was like this mental block where I felt like my late game was worse, even though I had all the com golds kind of thing. And I was like, I just couldn't do it. And so I was like, I need to do both if I want to get better at no IMG. And so I sat down and frankly, NG Plus got closer to what I considered a more crazy goal, sorry. So that's really what I focused on. And I went, because the world record at the time was 836. And I just really wanted to beat it. I just had this drive and it came. I had a bit of free time for a while. So I was streaming. It was like 12 hours a day, or like it was like 10 to 12 hours a day.
Goodness.
And I was just looking for strats. I was doing runs. I was practicing. And I found so many things. So first, like I was just practicing and doing runs. So I took the record in NG Plus and I took it from 836 to 834, 830. And then from there, I was like, this is pretty good. And then that's when I started finding a crap ton of strats because I just really wanted to push it. And so I found the original version of Snivelak double charge strat, which saved 3 seconds for Snivelak, only for NG Plus at that point, because we were like, this isn't worth it for no IMG, and arguably still isn't. And so that was a few seconds. Then the next day we realized you could store Dynamo with that, which kind of like swing shot storage. Which have you been told about
that? Go ahead and explain it to me.
So basically, there's this when you kill Protopet, it always stores your second weapon or second gadget, whatever that may be.
Right.
And so we realized you can't store items like in the menu, things that are under items like electrolyzer. Else we'd do that no IMG and we'd save crazy time.
Okay.
But that doesn't work. It's just gadgets or weapons which work. So for example, you can store the swing shot as your second weapon when you kill Protopet, and then you enter the new game for challenge mode, and then that'll still be your secondary as long as you don't override it.
Right.
And so in NG Plus that was developed, and in no IMG it's still theorized and technically quicker, but it's like because of weapon lag you can't really make it work in no IMG.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's that, and that's kind of a theorized thing which can't really be capitalized on. But that was found to be quicker. And then we found poking on Snivelak boss,
Okay.
which was I'm assuming you've seen the old Snivelak sheepinating of the boss.
Yes, I was aware of that one. Yep.
Which everybody loves that one. It's amazing. But we were like, sure, it's way quicker than the casual fight, but we kind of looked at it and we're like, from a speedrun perspective, this is still a kind of slow boss fight.
Yeah.
And so a mixture of mixing other categories, like there was a wrench only strategy to kill him by basically making him kill himself by stun locking him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And what we realized is through really specific control of the boss, you can like get up onto the top turret so that he flies above higher than he normally does, and then get him to drop down on one of the bridges that he normally breaks. But because of how he drops, he won't actually break the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can be on the bridge with him, which does several things. For one, your shield can damage him there. For two, he can shoot himself. So that's half the benefit you're pushing into yourself. Have you seen poking? Shall I pull the video up?
No,
Okay,
I know this. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's damaging himself then, and also it works the tech, specifically in NG Plus, it's with Hover Bomb, where basically you push the gun into their hitbox, like the gun hitbox goes into the boss hitbox, and that does two things. One of them is it can allow you to hit several spots of their hitbox at once. For example, in NG Plus, I think we're hitting one of his legs and his crotch at the same time.
Okay.
The other thing is we realized the crotch takes extra damage for no apparent reason, other than the game was developed by young adults.
Yeah.
And the third thing is in NG Plus, the hover bomb is then, because it spawns the bombs in them, it doesn't know what to do, and so it just explodes them instantly. And so you can just fire it ridiculously quickly. And all of those things added up to a strat which killed the boss. I think it was 12 seconds quicker.
Wow.
It was like the single biggest time save in ages. And so because of that, all these strats got found so quickly. I was like, I really want to push NG Plus. And so even though this whole time I was kind of like, yeah, I want to go for 22 and no IMG. I want to go for it, but it was like my focus just had to take NG Plus because it was just closer to a minute barrier in a shorter category, which I was kind of like, this is a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I focused on that, and then we found a few more things. I then ended up finding a way to skip using the jump pads using proxies, which saves an extra 5 seconds, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it ends up being the strat which saves 16 seconds while being monstrously hard. Now, that version of the strat, poking is in the current world record, but it's not the full version. It's kind of slow. It's one of these new modern strats. Like, so I would say from the 2345 and the 836 NG Plus and no IMG times, that was kind of the end of what I would call like it was getting to a point where it was this super pushed category, but it wasn't really like the skill floor was still, I mean, the skill ceiling, sorry, was still it was still indisputably not up there with Ratchet 1 or 2, 3. So most people still call it the dumbed down game. And then I started looking into double charges. So they're frame perfect tricks. I don't know if anyone's gone through them with you yet.
You're welcome to, because you're like the guy, right? Everyone's like, yo, man, FeaR is really pushing this double charge thing. So it's like, okay,
well,
cool. So
yeah,
you tell me.
So basically there's quite a few things to it. So normally when you hold a charge, it loses its speed, right? So for the first second, almost exactly, it's full speed charge, and then after
Mhm.
that, you can turn much more quickly, but you lose your speed. So sometimes you're like, you can't clear a gap with one charge in a midair jump. And the
Mhm.
midair jumps, to clarify, they're not even close to frame perfect. They're much easier. But sometimes you can't quite clear the gap. Or in the case of Uzla, the second planet in the game, it's you can't quite keep a charge to a proxy spot with enough speed to get a proxy that can do anything.
Oh.
And so what we needed, and we always knew they existed, but they were kind of like a tool assisted only thing. So there's all these amazing task segments from like Nano Hologuys and Cypress. They're both, or Sippy as everyone calls him, they're
Yep.
both like old tasks, and there's these amazing clips of them just doing like 23 midair charges in like random spots, and it's just like, this is sick. But they were never really RTA viable.
Yeah.
But I sat down and I was for some reason, like, I started looking into them back when I had like a mid 24 or something. I don't even know why, I couldn't tell you. I was just really intrigued by them. I was like, these are really cool. And I ended up accidentally, honestly, developing this method where um you basically, normally you have to time it at the exact end of a charge. And because it's frame perfect, you can buffer the first input. So in the first half of the charge, you hit R1, and that
Mhm.
means you only have to hit the R1 input once rather than the normal twice for charging at the end of the charge. But that one frame is still at a specific time, and that's really difficult to get. Normally,
Mhm.
people use like a mixture of like mashing really fast, or they'll like flutter two fingers on it, or any method to try and just mash it. But there's no real consistent way to do it. Um, and so I accidentally developed this method where and I deliberately developed it towards the end, but originally the idea was accidental, where you cancel your own charge earlier, but that of course gives you control over when the charge ends.
Yeah.
And so I've got this specific like way that I press the buttons, um, which allows me to go like circle and then R1 on the next frame, which gives me the midair. And it's reasonably consistent to the point where I think my personal best for doing them in a row, I've done 17 in a row.
Whoa.
Uh, so yeah, like, it's clearly a method you can get consistent at. And obviously that's like not just, first day. That's after I made the method, putting
Mhm.
at this point like over a year into practicing it.
God damn.
And I would just sit down some days and I would just practice for like an hour. I would just sit there midair charging, because like, even though I didn't really expect that I would ever be good enough to play in a meta where they were required, I still was interested enough that I was like, I want to be consistent at these. And also I wanted to look into strats that would use them theoretically, but I didn't want to just throw my head at a wall for an hour to get it once. I was like, I
Yeah.
wanted to be semi-consistent. And so I developed this method, and then because of that, I made a few of these strats. For example, there's one on Uzla, which I think is now in my world record, and there's one. There's a triple charge on Notak, a triple charge on Siberius, but they both save under a second, so they're not worth it. And then there's a double charge clip out on Tabaro, which saves in theory about 7 seconds, but it's
Whoa.
ridiculously hard because you've got it's about a 10 frame window to do a 1 frame trick. Um,
Oh,
which
okay.
is just so hard, and it's halfway through the run, but I really want to go for that in the future. And like, yeah, so I looked into these strats, and that's pretty much double charging. So that's kind of what signifies the new meta,
Mhm.
because it's like, the other thing which was implemented is insta clips. So, timing the turret throw so that it pushes you through with the neutral speed, so you can make jumps like the Aranos 1 insta clip.
Yep.
And there's a few things like that. So there's just like, rather than being these individual harder tricks that made the game harder, instead, basically the top runners were basically just like, look, if we want this game to go further, we just need to do not just tricks that are harder, but just tech, just
Yeah.
raw tech, which is just harder. And so I personally did that with double charges. Scotto was the original guy who started implementing insta clips. And then from there, it's also just the tiniest niche optimizations. Like, so for example, on every proxy, you can get it super high, or you can optimize it to deliberately have a little less speed into it so that you get a little less height, which saves minimal time.
Yeah.
Like on NoTac, you save under a second from minimizing your proxies, but you start going for them because that adds up over the run.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's mostly just these pushes of optimizations. So yeah, then I pushed to bring it back to the no IMG NG plus push. It was like, even though there were all these things with being developed, which yes could go into no IMG, and I pushed it a little bit. I focused on it to get it down to 2331, and
Yep.
that was using all of these really modern strats. It was using an Aranos 2 wall climb, which goes around the wall,
Mm-hmm.
which was a new strategy. It's, for one, it's way more consistent. So even though technically it only saves like 2 seconds optimally, it ends up saving like 7 on average.
Oh.
And there was like a new method of clipping with turrets where you look down and you hold L1, which is kind of like the PS3 method, because for some reason, even when you're already in first person, holding L1 makes the turret aim differently and throw differently, which is
Interesting.
really weird. So
That
there's
is
just
weird.
like all
Yeah.
these niche things which got implemented, and I ended up using them to push to sub 8, but I haven't actually had a chance to push no IMG really where I want it to go yet, because it's sitting at 2331 right now, and sure, it's like it's a good record ish, but I mean everyone gives me crap for it on stream because I'm like, I always talk about how I think it's this garbage record, because like it wasn't that good when I got it realistically,
Yeah.
and like at least by like the standards I want it to be, and now there's like 20 seconds of time save that have been found. So realistically, like I'm trying to find time to do it. I want to
Yeah.
get like a 22.4x, like a 2250 or a 2240, something in that range. And that's very
Mhm.
doable using this like modern meta.
Yeah.
But like the main things is Zem. I don't think he wants to play Rack 2 NG Plus much anymore from the impressions I got from him. I don't know if he said otherwise to you. And Scotto, I just don't think has wanted to try either, frankly. From what I've heard from both of them, they're kind of excited to see the game push, but they don't really, and you'd have to double check this with them. This is
Yeah.
kind of just the impressions I've got, but they don't really want to play this meta, which is so ridiculous. Because realistically, I mean, I love it because I'm just weird like that. But it's like a very torturous meta because you've
Yeah.
got like in Aranos, sorry, the early game, right? You've got the Aranos 1 instaclip, which for most people chews up more than half of their resets.
Gosh.
And then you've got optimally Oozla has a double charge, which is frame perfect, which saves only like a second and a half. But at this point, it's in world record. It's one of those things you kind of just have to go for. Then you've got Whoopash zero drop, which optimally you need to hit it because if you don't, you lose 6+ seconds up to like 12,
Mhm.
which is just unacceptable. And then you've got jamming and Mactar, which are just to put them what they are, really high variance splits.
Mhm.
Because jamming array just, there's so many niche things which can go wrong, which lose you like a half second, and then a half second there, and a half second there. And so the early game is just ridiculously brutal. I've had so many sessions where I just sit there for 2 hours, not getting out of Whoopash kind of thing,
Gosh.
or not getting out of jamming array, which is only the
Right.
first 4 minutes. And it's like, so it's understandable that there's a lot of people. And Torpedo, he's an up and coming runner. He's, I think, I want to say third place right now,
I think so.
maybe second. I forget. Yeah. He hasn't wanted to put in a bunch of this new tech as well, although he does want to soon. But it's like he hasn't because it's just so brutal, and most people just struggle with it,
Mhm.
or don't want to commit the time to just losing runs. And realistically, also practice. Like with double charges and insta clips, you have to practice. Like when I got the sub 8 in NG Plus, and when I was then playing no AMG around that time to get the 2331, I was practicing 3 hours a day and running 6 hours a day kind of thing as like a
Jesus.
minimum. Like, and that was just the amount that I needed to play if I wanted to play at that level.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't like an option. It was like, and at this point, it's like, sure, I have maybe 2-3 hours to spare today, and I maybe have an hour tomorrow kind of thing, which sounds like enough to throw some runs in every now and then. But it's like, to me, it's like not even worth it because it's like, I want to push no IMG down and I know how much work that takes now.
Yes.
It takes 2 hours of practice a day minimum. And it takes, 5 hours of runs every couple of days kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it's like, unless I can commit that, I just frankly can't be bothered. So, and for like the next 4 weeks, I just can't do it. So, like, my honest opinion, Do you want my most brutally honest opinion on NG Plus? No IMG.
Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
I think the record history is going to be a lot more interesting in 6 months.
I was gonna say I'm gonna be
like,
a little annoyed because I feel like you're gonna. I'm telling you right now, you're like, oh, it's wintertime now, but you'll get your summer break here in 6 months in June or whatever, and you're gonna start.
Well, I get
crazy.
because I'm in Australia, it's inverted, so I actually get my summer break. I've only got 2 weeks of school left, and then I have a 6-week break. So that's what I'm going to be pushing for 22. That's when I want to push. I want to shave like 32 plus seconds off the record. That's my goal through my 6-week break.
Well, maybe by the time this video is about ready to go up, you'll break it. Which please do before the video comes out. If you break it the day the video comes out, I'm gonna be annoyed.
Yeah, but yeah, I kind of figured it was like worth bringing up with you. I'm like, look, it's like. Oh, also, thanks heaps for picking this game. It's a
of course
history, but
yeah,
I figured it was worth bringing up because I'm like, oh, I feel so bad if I came back like a week after you released it and then invalidated or like made it so you could have an extra 15 minutes in there kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
I would just feel bad if I didn't at least tell you. Yeah.
Well, listen, I know we're joking around, but in all seriousness, you're totally free to do that. Don't take us into consideration. do what you do. Don't be like, oh, I'm not going to play the game because the speed doc just came out.
Oh,
no,
like,
no.
Play whenever I can.
Exactly.
I love this game too much.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't worry about us. So you've been talking for a hot minute. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Sorry. You go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You have covered pretty much everything. But there are a couple of points I wanted to go over. Now that I'm getting my chance to talk, I'm like, what was I going to ask?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of just like was like, well, here's the history.
Hey, listen, I appreciate it. One of the things I was going to mention is that Scotto was doing this is really irrelevant, but I'm bringing it up. So you said he got into a marathon. It was the relay race. Whenever the
I remember that. Yeah.
RuPaul's thing was found.
Marathon was prelay.
Yeah, that's all good. You'd also mentioned that Scotto and Zem were very supportive of you. Gosh, should I even mention this? Zem was like, man, dude, FeaR is so cool and he was so good, but he's a bit of a choke artist.
Oh, yes.
was the term that he used, which I thought was funny.
I mean, like early days, like as you say, and as I tried to make apparent, it's like they really are, even though they had their wits at each other for a bit, like they really are. They're fierce competitors, but they're also amazing friends. So it's like, and that's kind of what it comes to, like whether we like it or not, and whether the opinion is, clicks are bad in communities, whatever. It's like the top runners do naturally gravitate to being friends because you're going to have to be talking a lot anyway. And so the kind of, I would say me, Scotto, Zem are pretty good friends just because of that competition and because of that association. And so they were amazing supporters. Even like back when I had a 26 flat, like, I was this streamer that was getting maybe 5 viewers a stream kind of thing, right?
Right.
And Zem would still stop in, and at the time he was still averaging 250 viewers, whatever it was. So for me, it was like this big deal. I'm like, yo, at the time he was, well, he still arguably, in my opinion, is like the greatest Ratchet runner of all time. And he was like coming into my stream and he was like, hey man, good luck. And he was like really pushing me. And he'd be like, you can get this record. And like he was constantly supporting, despite like so many people just being like, oh, he's some streamer that, oh, he's like 6th in IMG or something, whatever. Whereas Zen was like, no, this guy's gonna be good. And then Scotto as well, like even when I was learning the game, even before I had contention, I had like a 32, right? I was still learning how to do anything. And Scotto would be in my stream. He's like, oh, here's how you can do this a bit better kind of thing. Or here's how you actually even do this trick when I was learning. So like, they're just amazingly supportive members. And it's like, it's just an honor to even compete with them, really.
Hell
yeah.
Like
they're just so helpful. I feel like I forgot the question, to be honest.
It's all good. What was it like getting your record for the first time? having been like, you're so close, and everyone's like, dude, you're gonna do it, please, you can do it, dude. And then finally you break through, you don't choke this time, and you actually do it, dude.
Yeah, it was really strange. I think most people expect it to be this really big pop off moment where it's like, insane. There's funny clips of speedrunners everywhere, popping off after runs. But like for me, and I haven't actually gone back and watched it for a while. I think I popped off minorly, but like for the most part, I just remember this surreal feeling, and I remember thinking I was dreaming because, as you say, and as Zem said, I was a choke artist. Like I'd had in the month leading up to that, or whatever, or even when I had my 26. Another reason I stopped playing after 26 was because I had so many runs on world record pace when I got 26, right? And I would choke them, and I would choke them for about 4 months, I think it was.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I just could not PB for like 4 months or whatever. It was insane. And so I
Yeah.
was like, frick this, I'm done. And that kind of continued when I came back, where I just couldn't get these runs. I'd get them to Smog, I'd get them to Yeedle even, I'd get them to Grelbin, whatever. They'd be like right on the edge of getting it, and I'd just fail it. And I just couldn't do it. I didn't have my mentality sorted. So for me, it was more of this thing where I just kind of got used to failing, if that makes sense,
No, I
in a
get it.
lot of ways. So when I got it, I was kind of just like, is this real? Like, I remember I woke up the next day, and that's when it really hit me. A lot of times when I get these records, I found it's the next day it hits me, because the rest of that day I could convince myself it's a dream, whatever.
Yeah.
But I wake up the next day, and I'm like, I actually did that. And
Yeah.
it's always the day after, which is the best feeling, because it's just, especially when with no IMG, as I said, it's a crazy amount of work to play it at a high level. And it's this feeling where you wake up the next day and it's like, I don't have to play for 9 hours today. It's like, I achieved what I wanted to. It's done. I don't have to anymore. And that's kind of what it was with my first record, 2420, especially I was only back at the game for like 3 days or whatever it was. So
Yeah.
at this point, it just didn't feel real. And so it was just this feeling of, really? Like, did this actually happen? And in reference to like the first time getting record with the 2420, because that was like my first time where it hadn't been like, the first time where I hadn't been at the end of this big long grind. It was my first record. It was my first record where I didn't feel like I could stop right afterwards, which is really, I feel, counterintuitive, because I got it only 3 days back into my grind, and I'm like, this ain't that good. I'd beat it basically with new strats, and it was like, I knew I could be faster. So even though I got that really nice initial feeling of, yes, I finally did it, because I'd been on the cusp so many times, it really didn't feel as special as I think I would have liked it to. Because I just, so many times it was like, oh, look, FeaR failed another 20 world record pace run. Oh, look, he failed another 23. What a surprise, So like getting it was like, nice, this is good, but I need to keep going. So it wasn't really this instant amazing feeling that I think a lot of people have.
I get you. I think sometimes it's like, because you like, if you grind for 4 months and then you finally get at the end of the 4 months, it's like, oh my god, I needed to grind for 4 months. Like that was like a
Yeah.
4-month journey to get here.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
the journey. But then it's like, I'm going to grind for a while. Oh, I did it on accident. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
whoops.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's also why, like, I say, like, because I put more time and effort into the NG Plus grind. Like the NG Plus, the sub 8, that was the best I have ever felt after a speedrun. That was the only time it's ever been like an instant, oh my god, I did it kind of moment.
Yeah.
After the sub 8. And I imagine when I put the time in, and well, I say when, hopefully if, hopefully when I get the 22, it'll probably be this really amazing feeling that I finally did it, because I've already done a bunch of 22 attempts. Like when I do that, it'll be, yeah, whatever this grind was, plus the 3 months I put in before, plus the grind before that.
Yeah.
And it will be this big feeling. So realistically, like, the sad answer is, with no IMG, the feeling hasn't been that great. The NG Plus feeling was great with the sub 8, and I imagine the 22 will be a great feeling, but like the honest, most brutal answer is that none of my records have felt that amazing yet, because they just, by the time I got them, it was almost like bound to happen, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
it didn't feel so good. Yeah.
I get it. Okay. Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to bring up?
Real quick, I will actually
Yeah.
throw a document at you.
Okay, by all
Another
means.
one. Because member of the community, Mobius, he loves this kind of stuff, and I figure I should throw his name to you because he was thinking about making a similar video for NG Plus. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but just like for the road to sub 8. And so he's compiled a document which has a list of a bunch of just like all the tiny time saves and details that got found.
Man.
Like, better movement, better trick, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll see when I put it here. It's like this list specifically for NG Plus, but a good chunk of it applies to no IMG. And it's just this list of things that got found.
Oh, it's a hidden document. I need access.
Is it? Share.
So you can share it as a viewer.
Yeah, I can do it like this in theory. You should be able to see that now.
There we go. Cataloging shit.
Yeah, it's a really formal document, as you can tell. Yeah, so this like kind of, again, there's a lot of NG Plus exclusive stuff here, but there's a lot of specific details like the development of strats and specific dates. That's another thing. Yeah, I didn't really talk too much about much of the strats because a lot of it, frankly, I just don't remember because it was minuscule. Like between the difference between Scotto's records and my records, I feel a lot came down to just because for a lot of it, especially when we were both competing, it was like, as I said, he had the consistency, I had the speed, so we kind of had most of the same strats. So these NG Plus strats are the main developments that have actually been implied into no IMG. And then there's a few other, small optimizations like Tadano movement I noticed was pretty bad when I went back and watched it, and things like that where I optimize it slowly. But a lot of it just comes down to that where I was like, I could just play quicker, and I got consistent at that finally, and that's how it improved. I hate saying it like this because it sounds so arrogant, but it's like a good chunk of the progression from Scotto's records to my record, both in NG Plus and NG Plus no IMG, a good chunk of that wasn't like strats. A good chunk of that was simply just playing quicker. Like, yeah.
I know it sounds kind of, arrogant, but at the same time, you literally spent time timing 5-second segments to make sure you had the most optimal movement.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
exactly.
And it makes sense that like you literally went through. That was another thing I was going to ask you. Was that you literally went through and like, okay, let's rethink what we've been doing this entire time and see what's actually really faster.
Yeah. I can think of one specific example. Because ages ago, I'm sure Scotto went over this with you. There was no specials and there was no IMG, and no IMG originally had a lot of first-person tech and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then we realized a bunch of the golds for no specials were quicker. So people originally back then, it was like, early 2018, late 2017, I want to say.
Okay.
Probably early 2018. They were just like, oh, okay, these no special strats are faster. Let's just do them.
Yeah.
And so they kind of ported them over, but they didn't go through. They did it in giant segments, right? Like, for example, Mactar, it was load to arena was quicker in no specs, but they didn't go through and time, ship to the elevator, to the taxi, up the ladder, to the wall bounce, to the arena, And that's kind of what I went through and did. I was like, okay, there might be some differences here. And so I found some of them weren't actually better. And so with all of Mactar, I went through and I did all these specific changes in like all the planets. And it was just things like that. Where it wasn't necessarily people being ignorant. It was just people hadn't thought beforehand to kind of like split it up in that way and time it. And so I was just like, it became a meme because it was like, I remember I posted this little clip and I was like, oh, here's a 0.2 second faster Mactar movement. People were like, oh, here's FeaR timing his 0.2s again. I'm like, it's quicker. What do you want from me? Like, and that was just a big part of it, as well as also just like even not timing things, just like not things based on timings, just setting up quicker. Like when you have to charge, taking one step instead of 3 steps or whatever, or just going straight out into a charge instead, and stuff like that. And just generically, there's no real way to say it other than just playing a bit quicker. Like, which is really what a lot of it came down to.
Optimize, optimize, optimize.
Exactly. To a brutal degree.
Indeed. Well, that's speedrunning for you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I'm just trying to think.
We talked about a lot.
Time. Yeah. Trying to think through. It's like there is I feel like a relatively important point to be made in version differences.
Okay.
Because it's like in PS2 NTSC, Black Label copy of the game is by far the quickest version for no IMG. And NG Plus. I'm not sure if you're doing specifically no IMG or like.
I'm gonna be doing no IMG.
Yeah,
I would only cover NG Plus if it's like I wouldn't cover the category in general. I'd only ever reference it if it was particularly pertinent to the history.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just kind of why I kind of felt bad doing on that tangent before, but I figured that
it's all good.
Tangent from the 836 to sub 8 was really relevant, basically, to why I didn't push 2331 lower. Because, like, okay, that's I guess the final point I'll make. It's like the 2331, as I see it right now, and as I've said on stream so many times, is a garbage world record, in my opinion. Like, I look at it, and I've watched it back so many times. I'm like, look, the 7 seconds here, the 7 seconds there. It's played it's not played badly, but to the standard that I had to get to play to get sub 8 in NG Plus.
Yeah,
to that standard, it's played badly. And there's just new time saves. And so it's like, even though people hate it when I'm like, yeah, world record sucks, it's like, I really do feel that sucks, which is why I want to go through and beat it. But the reason I didn't is because I was putting that time into NG Plus. And that's kind of why the world record sits where it does. It's like, because, well, I stopped playing it to play NG Plus. Like, that's why, like, I just suddenly kind of stopped playing. I think my 2331 description, nice, but will improve soon. Haven't improved it in months. Like, almost half a year at this point. Because I kind of randomly I started finding this stuff, and I was like, oh, all right, I guess I'll go play NG Plus then. And that's why I just suddenly stopped. Like, my no IMG runs just dropped off the face of the earth at that point. Not because I didn't like it, not because I don't want to beat it, but just because, well, I was focusing on something else. Like, yeah.
We got to go practice in the dojo over there first. Then we got to bring it back.
And then I ended up turning NG Plus into what wasn't a no IMG practice, but that's a different topic. It's so goddamn brutal to play in NG Plus. Oh my god. I don't miss that. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Let me look at the questions you sent me before, actually.
Yeah.
I had some ideas.
One of the reasons why I generally don't ask people or write the questions down is that depending on the guest, sometimes I'll either stick strictly to the questions or we just go off on a tangent, right?
Yeah. So I'm a very tangent-based speaker, as you can probably tell.
Yes, I picked that up.
I try to bring it back and keep it relevant, but yeah, it's just like, God, I speak about this game and there's just like so many ideas come to me. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, you got a lot to say. So
yeah. Oh yeah, specifically, yeah. So bringing it back to Scotto. Yeah, he's Scotto and Zem, like, it's this weird dynamic where it's like everybody, it's just like human nature to want to pick the best at something, right? Like everyone wants to know, oh, who's the best at, tennis? Who's the best at, being intelligent. I don't know, science. Who's the best at X game? Like, it's just a thing that people like to do.
Mhm.
But the interesting thing I find in Rack 2, everyone is split. Like, you ask one person, they'll say Zem. You ask one person, they say Scotto. A few people say me, although I disagree with them personally. But like, the best, in my opinion, the best player to play Rack 2 is Zem. And in my eyes, that's because if you look at what he's done for the category, like he's pushed it so far. And one thing he did, even though it's not true anymore, for a while there was a time where Rack 2 was an easier Ratchet 3. That was pretty much
Right.
just what it was. Like, it's so far from the truth now. I personally, this is kind of a hot take, but I personally think that the optimal route for no IMG is significantly harder than Ratchet 3. But again, that's my hot take. But it's like, when you look at it, you have to do all these one-frame tricks to save time that doesn't save that much time, but it's just expected, kind of thing. And that's kind of the way I approach it and think about it. But Zem, he just he brought, because he did so much in Ratchet 3. And I mean, if you look at the world record progression for that game, it's just 6 years of Zem.
Yeah. Exactly.
And because of that, he's gotten really good at some of the fundamentals. And so when he brought that skill to Rack 2, it makes sense that he demolished. And he did demolish for the longest time. No one could compete with Zem in any of the original trilogy for the longest time. And so he brought that initial level of optimization, I would say, to Ratchet 2, because, like, you looked at it and you could look at the records before Zem, and it's like, okay, they're pretty good, but there's like, they charge, they stop for 2 seconds, they charge again, they stop for 2 seconds, they charge, and it's just generically like that kind of unoptimized things. But because Zem played after playing Ouya, which was already at this point ridiculously optimized, it's just the simple things like charge, wrench, swing around a corner, instantly charge again. Bang, saved a second or whatever. Like, and so that's why I personally think Zem is the best Ratchet 2 runner in historical context. And yeah, and then obviously him and Scotto are just insanely supportive. Like, I cannot stress enough how nice people they are and just help everyone.
Hell yeah.
So yeah.
Which is really funny. They were beefing really hard for a while.
Yeah. I'm assuming they've given you the story behind that.
Well, it's funny is that Zem was like, yo, man, I fucking hated Scotto. It was on site. I wanted to kill that motherfucker. Right. And he was like, man, it was so bad. And then I asked Scotto, I said, yeah, so Zem was kind of telling me that you guys weren't really that friendly. And he was like, yeah, well, I made a guess so. I said some mean things to him. And I said that his trilogy, any % world record, was kind of a scam. But that's about it. And I'm like, okay, well, apparently Scotto doesn't think it's that big of a deal.
Well, it's funny because Scotto's such a like a calm guy. Like, he doesn't often have mic on stream, but when he does, like, you hear it. He might be 2 minutes away from finishing the run and fail world record, and he's like, whatever, kind of thing. Like, you hear me or Zem, we lose a run that close, and we're screaming, we're yelling. It's like, God damn it,
Yeah.
But he's just so calm, and that's like his whole approach to everything. So, like, even though you had Zem, he was fuming. Everyone could tell Zem was fuming at Scotto.
Yeah.
Scotto was kind of just like, I guess Zem doesn't like me. like Scotto was just playing the game he wanted to play. Like, he was going to play Ratchet 2 anyway. He didn't really overly care, but he would throw some like snide comments. Like, in his stream, he'd do a strat and he'd be like, "Oh, there's a strat Zem can't do," and it was just like this little like petty beefing. So much of it was just so petty.
Yeah.
But and then you had Zem. He didn't want to play Rack 2 as much, but he came to prove a point. And whether or not like the beef was a good thing, they're good friends now. But whether or not that beef was a good thing for the game, it was an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Because you had Scotto, he was just pushing the game because he wanted to. And then you had Zem, who was pushing the game because he wanted to be better than Scotto. And so it just got pushed super far. And for the health of the game, I think that was one of the biggest turning points of the game, going from watered down Ratchet 3 to being its own beast that was really hard. I would say that was what kind of started to cause it, that mini beef, as we like to call it. The illustrious Scotto Zem beef, as most of the community members remember it. Yeah.
Okay. That's the revolution. That's when things really
Yeah,
start
exactly.
kicking in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'll throw more, like just a few more side notes at you, things that you
Absolutely.
might find interesting for the sake of the video, I guess. I mean, are you aware of the Ratchet Speedrunning Discord?
I am in the Ratchet Speedrunning Discord.
Okay, good. Yeah, because like so much of the developments are in there, and if you ever need to date something, um, if you can get the name of it, or at least what we're starting to call it, whenever, you can usually search it, and there's like the discussions when we talk about it, because most of the developments are documented in the Discord. I personally try to document everything I find in the
Nice.
Discord.
That's good. It's very good.
Yeah, because I always figured if something like this came up, it'd be helpful. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah. Or you can look at the document I sent you. They're more, obviously the NG Plus portion of the game more so.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of like dates and stuff in there, and yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay.
That's about everything I can think of. Unless you got anything else you want to cover.
I don't have anything else. You definitely covered everything I wanted to ask and more. So thank you. This has been
Free
fun.
info.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. You're giving me a lot of not ammo. That doesn't sound like the right word. That definitely sounds like I'm trying to come up with like a drama hit piece. But
Then FeaR said this game sucks.
yeah.
It's on tape.
There we go. We got him, boys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and I'll end the recording here so we can wrap this up.